And we are live. Well, Lee, thank you so very much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge and insight about post pandemic leadership. Obviously, an incredibly timely topic for Pagan Pride in 2021. So, without further ado, I'm going to let you take it away, start presenting. You might want to come off mute, and we're ready to listen.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name's Lee, and I'm very happy to be here today. First off, I just want to take a moment to thank Lawrence and the Puget Sound Pagan Pride crew for putting on another gathering this year. It's been really great, so it's always nice to have that going on. And also, thank you for letting me present a workshop. So I really appreciate that, and I'm very honored to be here today, so thank you. And also, thank you to all the other workshop presenters. They've been pretty good, so I set the bar high. So we'll see if I can reach that with this little workshop. So I'm kind of here on behalf of my hometown crew, the Whatcom Pagans. So shout out to all the Whatcom Pagans who are in attendance. It's always great to see everyone. And with that, let's get started. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about post-pandemic leadership. My name is Lee Lamar, and I've been doing this stuff for a while. I was encouraged to give a little bit of background. So I started out in the spiritual realm pretty early on when I was probably 12, 13, middle school. Got into Taoism, and then in high school I discovered classical yoga, so it's kind of been my thing ever since. But then in my early 30s, my wife Elaine kind of turned me on this idea of paganism, and for me, I read a couple of books and I was like, wow, this is pretty wild, because I grew up on a farm in eastern Kansas, so I'm kind of from a long line of redneck dirt farmers, so I'm kind of pagan by birth. But when I realized there was a religious context to it, then that was a pretty cool thing. So that's kind of when I got my start. We had a daughter in '96, and we were like, well, we would like to raise her in this because it's very empowering for the feminine. So we had the opportunity to join a seminary in 1999. So we did, and both went through the process of getting ordained. Elaine, it only took her 3 years. Me, it took me 9. I had to take a 5-year break and get a bachelor's degree in computer science from the UW. But then I rejoined the program and then finished up in 2008. Was involved in officially setting up the Whatcom Pagans group in 2012. The community had always been up here, and we were in it from the mid 90s or whatnot. We just finally decided to become official and give ourselves a name and and do website and newsletter and Facebook and all that good stuff, right? So that was fun being involved in that. And it's a community where we do 8 public Sabbaths a year, and we've been doing that ever since 2013 was our first full wheel of the year, and we've been going ever since. So that's always great to do that. Also, a 3rd degree high priest. I got that done this year. We formed our coven, Luna Del Mar, back in 2001. And into about 5-6 years ago, we had some kids want to join. So we kind of started back up again. And my wife, Elaine, we decided, well, we should get our 3rd degrees to be good examples for the kids. So we did that. We got it MBOL 2020. That was the last thing before lockdown. So we were pretty lucky to get in and get that done. A couple of months ago, I presented this for the Tallest Leadership Summit, which went really well. That's a great organization for those who are interested in leadership. Check them out. And I'm currently a student at the Cherry Hill Seminary. I'm in their community ministry certificate program. Been wanting to do more teaching, so I thought, well, I would do a little knowledge check and see what academics think about this whole neo-pagan thing. So that has been good. Been learning some stuff there. So that's a little bit about me. But to keep going here, so post-pandemic leadership. Well, what does that even look like? Well, I would suggest it probably looks a lot like pre-pandemic leadership. It's just we got a few more social issues that have developed over the last, year or two. But for the most part, probably very similar. But the thing is, we've been in our caves for a year and a half, just kind of rusting away, and we're all kind of just now getting out again. So that would be a good time to talk about leadership and some of the things we have forgotten in that time. But admittedly, I'm a bit of a leadership geek, and I'm a big fan of fundamentals. So I thought, well, this might be a good time to, shake the rust off and just review some of the basics of well-rounded spiritual leadership for us all. So basically, yeah, it's a way to refresh ourselves and get back to work, because that's what we do, right? We're community-oriented folks, and we like doing stuff together. And strong leadership can really build a good community. So in this workshop, I'm going to have 3 20-minute little segments with about a 10-minute question session in between, because there's a lot of information. So I want to give you a little chance to process it. And then at the very end, I'm going to send you home with a reflection question for you to think about. So you have homework. Okay, so spiritual leadership basics. So I kind of see there's 3 different areas that stack up to make you a really good spiritual leader. So I've been involved in spiritual leadership for a long time in both the military and the pagan community. And by seeing them both, it's really allowed me to see kind of what works and what doesn't. So today I'm going to talk about principles that I've developed over the years, and I follow myself, and I've had quite a bit of success as a spiritual community leader with them. And I believe that's probably a big reason why Whatcom Pagans is doing as well as it is, because everybody in our community, all the leaders, kind of have the same philosophy, and it allows us to really have a great, thriving community. But another thing is you're not only a leader, you're also a role model. You got a lot of people looking at you, trying to figure out how to be themselves. So it's nice to be able to model good behavior so other people can pick up on that, and it just makes your community better. This is really kind of a very broad overview of some basic spiritual leadership principles, but hopefully it will, help to give you an idea of what it takes really to be a well-rounded spiritual leader. So what I really do have is 17 little topics, and they're arranged in these 3 developmental areas. And these 3 areas are connecting to divinity. So this is what you cultivate in yourself to give to others, right? Polishing your jewel. What is it that you have to offer? And I actually teach a 2-hour class on this, so I'm condensing it down to 20 minutes. So we're just hitting bullet points. The second part is spiritual leadership. And this is the style in which you give yourself to others, right? So you're developing yourself and you're giving yourself to others. And I actually have taught this a couple times during the pandemic when we were doing online classes to a bunch of newcomers. Not that they're necessarily going to develop into these spiritual leaders, but it gives them an idea of what to look for in spiritual leaders for them to follow. Because, when you're young, you don't know nothing about nothing, and you make potentially bad choices when you find the first person that knows something about what it is you're interested in, right? So this way, people know kind of what to look for, and then that's been pretty successful. And then lastly, building community building, really it kind of implies more than one person is going to be involved, right? We tend to be a little bit gregarious. We like getting together as pagans and doing stuff. And so you're going to be with other people, and it's all about, getting people to work with you. Ideally, you want to have more people coming into your group than you have going out, because if you have more people going out than coming in, your group's not going to be around very long, right? So, and there's a bit of an art to it, and we're going to talk about that today. So the overall arc for today's information. So we're going to talk about personally connecting to the divine, or becoming in spirit, right? And then taking that spirit to your people, and then keeping and growing your people into a community. So that's kind of where it's all going today. Connecting to divinity. So there are several sections that I like to work on holistically in order to develop myself as a spiritual being, as a spiritual person. And those involve physical development, spiritual development, and personal development, all very important things that we need to work on. And then holistically, it allows you to become a much better person and be able to take that to your people in whatever way it is, right? So, remembering that a lot of this stuff is not necessarily theology based. This is more practical skill based, right, in this whole thing. So connecting to divinity, the first part is physical development. We'll just go into that right quick here. So physical development, I always consider this the necessary foundation, right? So how does physical development have anything to do with spirituality? Well, the reality is, if you're, it's all about service, right? And if you're sick or dead, you can't serve anybody. So, our bodies are divine vehicles, and we should treat them as such. I mean, that's what we have to get around to serve people, because that's what a lot of us are here for, to serve others. And your body is going to be the thing that's going to allow you to do it. And the better off your body is, the more dynamic and the better longer that you can serve. So, that's why I call this the necessary foundation. If you don't have a body that's functioning, you're not serving anybody, right? And it's really hard to do that. So, but it's really simple, very simple principles. Basically, just food and movement is what this involves, right? And when I talk about food, a couple of things to keep in mind. First off, drinking water. People always say 8 cups of water a day. Well, that's actually pretty good, because you always want to start your day, with a quart of water when you arise in the morning. And the reason for this is pretty simple. If you have a little visual, if you can imagine what the outside of your body would look like if you've never showered or bathed, it'd be pretty yucky, right? Well, that's what your insides look like if you're not taking a bath every morning by drinking that quart of water. So by cleaning the body out, getting the toxins out, can just actually make you a more spiritual person, man, just by getting all that junk out of your body that is detracting from your goal, from your mission, from your ministry, right? So drinking that water, cleaning yourself out. I also like to say, eat food, not food products. Chances are, if it comes in any kind of a container, package, box bag, it's going to be a food product. They talk about eating on the outsides of grocery stores, right? Because 95% of the stuff they sell are food products. Now, I figured this out. I had a friend whose dad used to always say food was slow poisoning. But later on, I learned that food, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, nuts, all that natural stuff is actually medicine. It's food products that are the slow poison. So if you can just avoid, eating the food products and instead eat food, you're going to be much, much healthier, much able to serve and do what it is you want to do. I also, recommend organic if possible, because you don't really want to be eating pesticides and herbicides. They act like hormone emulators in your body, and we're hormone engines. Everything happens because of hormones. So you start introducing stray signals, before you know it, you're dying young of a horrible disease and you don't know why. Well, that's because you've been, lifestyle. It's your environment. So cleaning up your food will clean up your body and allow you to serve better. Second part, movement. I just say move as much as you can every day, and walking is king. I try to get in, 40 minutes of walking every day, either 220s or 40, depending weekend or work day, whatever. Do a little exercise in the morning while I'm drinking water. And so it's the very simple principles. You just got to try to do them. I mean, walking, we're built to walk. If you can get out and walk 15, 20, 30 minutes every day, you're going to be much, much healthier, and you're going to be able to serve much better. So eating food, drinking water, eating food, not food products, trying to get it organic, moving as much as you can every day, you will be much healthier, and you will do a much better job serving your community. Okay. Spiritual development. So this is basically where you're going to do your most important work, right? It's very important as a spiritual leader to be in spirit. And some of the best ways to do that is by quieting yourself, because the goddess is very subtle. You don't want to get to the point where she has to smack you across the head to get your attention, right? You want to be listening as much as you can every day, and you do that by quieting yourself. So meditation is really where a lot of your main spiritual development is going to happen in that regard. So just I teach, a specific type of meditation, but that's kind of beyond this. So I'm just going to talk about general guidelines for what you want to do, however it is that you do it. So you want to quiet yourself for about 20 or 30 minutes, 3 to 4 times per week. Just trying to just be quiet. Just let your mind settle or whatever, right? And I like to recommend starting your devotion with some kind of a deity mantra or something, because there's a process of creating a personal relationship with your deity, whoever that or whatever that may be, right? Whatever your take is. So I always like to start out by a prayer, praying to your deity, asking for something, thanking for something. And that kind of starts to develop this relationship that puts you in spirit. And then you just continue that forward with your meditation. You can contemplate on your deity, whatever, just allowing yourself to quiet and slow and calm down and kind of let that small, subtle voice come through and listen to that and start your relationship to be able to get in spirit. The second part is shadow work. Shadow work is one of the things, our shadows really pull us out of our spiritual place. So working on it on occasion is also, very important. Shadow work really deals with, parts of our splintered psyche or whatever that things we don't like, we can't deal with, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it triggers us, pushes our buttons, all that good stuff, right? But it's not stuff that's easily visible. So, you just want to try to work on it the best you can. There are a couple ways that you can do it. I teach a work class. I do it through working with chakras. So energy centers, because some of that stuff is tied up in energy centers. So I drum, we visualize, we do a bunch of stuff. It's one way to do it. There's another method called the 3-2-1 method by Diane Hamilton. Very interesting, where you talk about an issue in the third person, and then you talk about that issue to them in the second person, and then you actually talk as the problem, right? And that allows you to psychologically kind of reintegrate those splintered off parts of your psyche back into you. Probably one of the easiest ones to do is The Work by Byron Katie. Very similar thing, where you go and you talk about something, and then you go in and you talk as that thing. So another process of being able to reintegrate those splintered off parts that detract us from being spiritual. Once they get reintegrated, then you can deal with it. And it's like, oh, okay, then it makes you a much better person. So how often for shadow work? Well, probably, whenever you need it, a couple times a month, whatever, how active you are at working on your stuff, but something you want to do, because that's your shadow is something that you just kind of have to deal with, as a spiritual person. You want to stay in spirit. You don't want to get pulled out. So things to work on. All right. So then lastly, we have personal development. So this is where it all just really kind of comes together in becoming the spiritual person that you want to be, right? So I like to call it polishing your jewel. Whatever it is that you have to offer as yourself, as a spiritual being in spirit, you're going to polish that up to where you're nice and shiny, and then you're going to give that out, right, through your service. So some of the things that really are involved in it are reducing turbulence, and then actually what I like to call the eternal now. So for reducing turbulence, so here's a list of guidelines I'd like to kind of just talk through right quick for you to consider bringing into your life. So these are the kind of things that can cause turbulence when you're not doing them. So by kind of adhering to these, you can calm yourself down, your presence, so you can actually be more in spirit. So things like non-harming, which is non-maliciousness in the broadest sense, extending to actions, speech, and thoughts, right? You don't really even want to be thinking bad thoughts about people if you're trying to be a spiritual leader, right? Because people, if you're not in spirit, you're not really a spiritual leader. So you got to have to get into that space, right? And sometimes our thoughts can be just as bad as our actions or our speech. Truthfulness, of course, telling the truth and thinking the truth. Non-stealing, which is no unauthorized appropriation of another person's belongings. We don't want to be doing that. Moderation, basically don't becoming obsessed with your desires, so like have a slice of pie, not a whole pie, have a drink of beer, not a six pack, whatever, it's just making sure your obsessions don't control you. So moderation. Greedlessness, the non-acquisition of belongings because you see the disadvantage of acquiring and keeping as well as losing or being attached to them, right? So, people, greed is kind of an acquisition kind of thing, right? And if you don't care about that, it's like, well, it's not baggage in your life and you can be more spiritual, not be so turbulent. One I like to add in here, non-rightness, and that's basically giving up the need to be right. I mean, a lot of arguments happen because both people think they're right. And if you kind of give up the need to be right, oh man, let me tell you, it just is such a relief. Things just pass by. I'm like, hey, whatever, it's just such a great space to be in when you no longer have to be right. Other things to think about, purity. Includes, physical, mental, verbal cleanliness, just being, more spiritual person. Contentment, voluntary simplicity, not to covet more than the means at hand. We're always trying to acquire more, and it's always just a drag. So just being content with what you have. Practice, of course, your daily spiritual practice, your meditation or whatever, your walks. Study, studying your deity, developing your relationship. And of course, devotion to that idea of consciousness or divinity, whatever is driving your life, right? So these are things, as a spiritual person, you really want to start developing in yourself, really polishes you and makes you a much better person, much better spiritual person. So you can take that out to your community. And then the last thing is the eternal now. Really, so I've been doing this yoga thing for quite a while, and I've really kind of been exposed to the ultimate spiritual state. And it's really a state where you're no longer encumbered by your thoughts, emotions, or your shadow, right? It's just a state of pure awareness and being. It's not like you're all blissed out or anything like that. It's just where you're here entirely. Your thoughts aren't pulling you out, your emotions aren't pulling you out, your shadow's not pulling you out. There's nothing pulling you out. You're just here, and you're pure being and pure awareness, right? So that's kind of what we're looking to try to strive. So by having the necessary foundation in the spiritual work and reducing the turbulence, it allows you to be present and in spirit, right? So something to strive for with all this, and then you become more in that state, and then you take it to your people, and they appreciate it. So when you're doing this stuff, everyone around you is going to be much happier because you're probably driving them crazy right now, right? So as we get better with ourselves. So then to recap, so to be a great spiritual leader, you really firmly need to be in spirit. I mean, I probably would not follow anybody who I don't sense as being in spirit, right? Because that's kind of the nature of being a spiritual leader. You're kind of connected. So you got to really connect to divinity in whatever way it is and become that and start bringing that into you. Because if you look at it, we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but, divinity and love are like synonymous, right? In a lot of contexts. So the more you're becoming in spirit, in divinity, you're becoming in love. So you're becoming more of a loving person, and you're just becoming love, right? And people are going to pick up on that later. So you can kind of really tell when someone's really getting deep in spirit, because they become really deep in love with whatever it is that's going on, right? So the more that you're in spirit, then the less, down the road, you're going to cause problems for your community, right? Because if you got stuff going on, pulling you out of being present, then you start not making the best choices and decisions, and then it can cause problems, right? So as a spiritual leader, you kind of got to follow a course in order to do the best you can for those around you. Okay, so that was a lot of information. So we'll take a few minutes and see if there's any questions. I know some of this might be controversial, so any questions? And let's see, let me see here. I want to go back to my face. Okay, how do I do this? Well, let me try escape. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, so any questions from anybody about any of this?
That was a big download of a lot of really interesting information, Lee.
Yeah, well, that's why I wanted to kind of give people a couple minutes to kind of process it, because yeah, there's a lot going on and with all this stuff. But may not be any questions. Maybe everyone gets it. So. All right, so let me get set up here again, and we'll continue on.
So we've got one question.
Okay.
And Firth, if you'd like to come off mute, please feel free.
Sure, thank you. So hi, this is Frith. I met somebody recently who conducted a ritual that I attended, and it was a really powerful ritual, and I felt deeply moved by the way they were humble and yet really sincere. And I'm wondering if maybe you will address this later, the role of sort of ego and self-promotion and assertiveness in leadership. It seems like sometimes the qualities that make a good leader don't actually lead those people to draw other people to them.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, because in the next part here, I'm going to talk about servant leadership, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about qualities you're going to want to look for in a leader, or the qualities you're going to want to exhibit as a leader. And maybe this will help answer your question a little better about that. Because I mean, yeah, when a spiritual leader is all about themselves, then you can kind of tell that, it doesn't usually work out well for them. But when you have a spiritual leader who is all about the people around them, then you can really kind of tell that they have a different take and a perspective, and like you said, ego,
Yeah.
It's all about that. So, but it's one of those things that you just kind of, I don't know, I'm closing it on 60. So I don't know if it's life perspective, because I've been around so long, versus being young and dumb kind of thing. Right. So yeah, I mean, as you get older, you get a little more mellow, and well, for most people, maybe ego isn't quite as big of a thing.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay.
Yep.
So any more before we continue on? No takers? Okay. Oh, we got a chat here. What's going on? Oh, okay. That was your chat. All right. Okay. Well, good. All right. Well, let me go back. Okay. So is everybody seeing this now again? Okay. There we go. All right. So polishing yourself up, getting ready to go. All right, so next, we're going to talk about how to present yourself to people, and that's in servant leadership. So servant leadership was officially kind of created or put on paper anyway back in the 70s by a guy by the name of Robert K. Greenleaf in his book, The Servant and Leader. And really what it does, it kind of fuses ownership with leadership. So for example, in the military, you know, very hierarchical kind of thing, and it's all about, it's not really a lot about ownership. You know, it's just like I'm telling you what to do, and then you tell the other guy what to do, and you know, there's not really a lot of ownership in that. So I really like the way this is done. Now, I and my peers have been kind of doing this for a long time, but I hadn't known it to be servant leadership until I went to the Tallest Leadership Summit 2 years ago, and I saw a presentation. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it is. And ever since then, I've been like, yeah, this is like, you know, the best stuff ever. Been sharing it with people, right? So what it really does is, you know, it goes from, like in the corporate or military, it's I'm the leader and you're here to serve me, you know. But of course, that doesn't work very well in spiritual environment like ours, right? Where pagans are all independents. It's like herding cats. So it becomes more like, as a servant leader, it's like I'm the leader and I'm here to serve you. So that's where it really fuses that ownership and leadership together. Okay, so one of the first things you want to look for in a servant leader is accountability. Okay, so obligated to explain, justify, and take responsibility for your actions and to answer to someone such as a person with more authority, right? That's kind of really the textbook definition of what accountability is, right? So you really, what it means for us is we're accountable to the ones that we serve, right? The people around us, those are the ones who we're accountable to. Another part of it is transparency, you know, making your actions visible for all to see, not trying to hide things or anything like that, right? And knowing that there are consequences when your actions are not acceptable. As I always tell people, it's like, well, you know, when you're in a spiritual position like that, you know, you kind of have to be nice to everybody all the time, regardless, right? Because as soon as you're not nice to somebody, you've lost them, they're gone. So there are consequences to that, you know. So basically I tell people, don't be a dick, you know, you got to be nice because there are consequences to it. There's accountability that you have to realize that it's going to happen if you act in certain ways in a spiritual leadership position, right? Accountability, it's right there. Next one, humility, having a modest opinion or estimate of one's own importance, rank, all that stuff, right? But it's really the ability to put one's accomplishments and talents in proper perspective. You know, like I had the thing at the beginning, you know, it's like, oh, my name is, you know, and I've done all this stuff. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm more of a, well, what have you done for me lately kind of thing. So I don't really like to talk about stuff like that so much. I mean, I put it up there because people need to know if I'm going to be presenting a workshop that I know some stuff. But it's not really something I worry about that much. You know, for me, I'm thinking about the next thing I can do. So it's really putting your accomplishments in perspective. I mean, I know a lot of people who are like wanting to, they're kind of driven to collect, you know, accolades or whatever, or honorifics. You know, oh yeah, I'm a this degree, or I'm a this ordained, or I'm a this whatever. And ultimately, that doesn't really work in your service mentality, I guess, as a spiritual leader, right? It's like, yeah, that stuff is cool, and that's the stuff you have to do to get better at what it is you want to do, but that's not you. You know, you did it, you moved on. What have you done for me lately, right? So the humility of that, it's like, well, you're just here to serve, right? And another part of humility, which is pretty big, is seeking help from others, you know, to overcome your limitations. When I was talking about, you know, we kind of restarted the Coven 4 or 5 years ago when all those kids were interested. Well, I was like, well, shit, man, I don't know how to run a Coven. You know, I was like, you know, so I went out and, you know, got 3 books and read a whole bunch of stuff. It's like, okay, now I have some idea what to do. But a situation where I could have said, oh yeah, I know how to run a coven, blah, 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 and then just not, and, you know, screwed it all up. So it's like having that humility to understand your limitations and to seek help to overcome those and just become a better person for whatever it is that you're doing, right? So humility, not about you, it's about them. Authenticity, you know, not false, real, genuine. So a lot of what that means for a spiritual leader is keeping your public and private selves in alignment. You know, you don't smile at somebody when you're gathered and then when you're home, just be talking all kinds of dirt about them. You know, it's like, yeah, no, you've got to really align yourself in all instances as to being in spirit, right? Keeping your public and private selves in alignment. And this means that you really must be congruent in that, in your actions, speech, and thoughts, you know, at all times. So yeah, you can't have this dual personality where you're, you know, the spiritual person in public, but you're, you know, not so much in private. That all has to be in alignment so you're the best person you can be at all times. So authenticity, right? Don't want any fake folks leading you. Next one, courage. So the quality of mind or spirit that enables a person to face difficulty, danger, pain. What's that really look like? Well, trying new approaches to old problems, maybe, you know, just because something's been done this way forever doesn't mean it has to be, right? Whereas a lot of discussion, man, about the whole, especially now about the male female thing, right? You know, and how do you approach that for those who aren't male or female or whatever, right? So there's always these things to tackle, and it's like having the guts to approach them and try to deal with them and try to work them out, right? You know, so it's challenging those conventional models that we actually get stuck in as, you know, as neo-pagans, as Wiccans. You know, we got our thing, and it's like getting out of that is sometimes kind of hard, right? But you got to have the courage to say, hey, wait, you know, this can be done better. Let's maybe look at that, you know. So having the courage to kind of step up, speak out, whatever it is, right? And generally then having the courage to rely on values and principles over just rules. Oh, we got all these rules. Well, in our covenant, we don't have a lot of rules because we all share the same values and principles, you know. So in Whatcom Pagans, we don't have a lot of rules because we all share the same values and principles. So it makes it super easy to be able to operate. So yeah, relying on what's right, not necessarily what's written, and having the courage to do that. Another good one, empathy, right? The psychological identification with or vicarious experiencing of the feelings, thoughts, and attitudes of others. But what it really leads to in community is understanding the why behind another's feelings, thoughts, or attitudes, right? So if you've got a member that has of your community that has a particular thing, you know, having empathy for them allows you to look closer and discover why. And then once you discover the why, and it's like, oh, okay, I understand why this person is the way they are. Okay, well, that's all right. We can deal with that, right? So having empathy is very important because all your community members are going to be different. They're all going to have some kind of a little something that you may have to accommodate, but you need to be able to understand why easily so you can do that. Because those who don't have the empathy are like, they just ignore people, and then people come, people go, right? People don't stay. So you want to be able to do that, to understand what it is that people are needing from being there, right? And having empathy. And also it creates an atmosphere of acceptance. That's one of the things we try to do with Whatcom Pagans, is create an atmosphere of acceptance. And, you know, we've been getting a little feedback. So we're thinking about it, you know, we're always in conversation. Well, how can we be more accepting? So for us, you know, we're a pretty empathetic community, and we're, you know, trying to do that, to be more acceptable of everybody. And as far as I know, you know, we're doing a pretty good job, but you can always get better, right? So having the empathy to do that as a person and even as a community. Empathy, it's good stuff. And then the next one, empowerment. The classical or hierarchical definition is the giving or delegation of power or authority, authorization, right? But I like to think in terms of, well, actually, it's the giving of an ability, an enablement, or permission. So what it really is, community-wise, is enabling your people to get involved and take ownership, right? When people take ownership, then they take it seriously and they show up and they do whatever it is that they're, volunteering or hoping to do, right? And along with that, you always want to be encouraging your people to develop. Personal development's a big thing. It's like everybody, hey, learn this, read that, get better, do another ritual. You always want to encourage people to do as much as they can, and then that leads them to taking ownership, right? And when people take ownership, then they become vested, and they're like, oh yeah, this is mine. I mean, probably just about everybody who regularly comes to Whatcom Pagan events thinks of Whatcom Pagans as theirs. I mean, they're vested. They're like, hey, man, no one messing with Whatcom Pagans, this is mine, So it's trying to empower people to be able to do that. And that's what makes communities super strong. When you've got 30 leaders who are really into it, it's really easy to have a solid community, because then no one has to be in charge. Everybody puts in their energy and everything just kind of moves in that direction. And empowering your people, yeah, it's good stuff. So that's the kind of thing you want to see in a leader, someone who is willing to empower others. And lastly, stewardship. And this is kind of the responsibility part, right? The responsible overseeing and protection of something considered worth caring for and preserving, right? And really, it looks like commitment to service over control, right? You're not there to control, you're there to serve. I mean, when the Whatcom Pagans started out, I was in a position where I was starting the website and the newsletter and, doing the annual Wheel of the Year planning meeting and all that stuff. So I was in this weird position where I could have, if that was my thing, I could have taken control over the community. But, it's like, it's well, for one, it's really kind of wrong. But also it's just like, it's too much effort. And then by decentralizing and spreading the power across everything, so now we have, people, someone else runs the website, the newsletter, the Facebook. All I do now is just get everybody together once a year to figure out the schedule. So by decentralizing all that, you're showing commitment to service and not control. It's like, me, Lee, I don't need to control anything because everything else is covered. We got 30 other leaders that are trying to also participate. So, there's no need for control. It's just, it all just gets done. So, and really it's being a caretaker of the community. It's like when you're vested in it, it's like you want the community to thrive and do a good job. And we're in a great space with that, because everybody is committed to being caretakers of the community. It's pretty amazing to see all that happening. A lot of stewardship. And then lastly, you become kind of a role model for the community. And I talked about that a little earlier, but yeah, as a steward, that allows you to show that, all this stuff does matter. This whole thing is worth caring for and preserving, your community, right? Very precious. And I'm learning the value and how precious it really is to have it. So stewardship is the last one. So servant leadership. So to recap right quick, of course, we have accountability, humility, authenticity, courage, empathy, empowerment, and stewardship, right? All really good qualities that you're either going to want to exhibit yourself or you're going to look for in the leaders that you're working with, right? So once again, a lot of information. So questions? So Frith, did that answer some of the questions that you had?
It did answer my questions for what to look for in a leader, but I'm still wondering like what the like what somebody can do to encourage somebody who's a natural leader who doesn't see it in themselves, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's a really good question. So that's kind of a subtle issue for us. Leadership, I've found out, is something that just like kind of happens, and people just kind of mature over time. Now, having historical perspective to be able to look back 20 years and watch people develop. And there's some people that kind of have a more of a natural affinity to leadership. I mean, I've been around it, so that's, I have an affinity for it. And which is why I've studied it so much, to try to figure out all these things to make it work in a spiritual context. But then you have others who are around it the whole time, and they're doing stuff, but they don't think of themselves as leaders. I mean, we got some people in our community I've known for 20 years, and they're just as leader-like as everyone else, but they don't really think about themselves as being a leader. So sometimes that's just like a personal realization, just because people don't necessarily want to be a leader or think of themselves as a leader, but that doesn't mean that they're not a leader. I mean, just the fact that you're showing up can make you a leader, right? So,
Yeah.
and that's why I really love the circle way, as far as a corporate structure or whatever for a group. I mean, hierarchies do certain things, but when you're in a circle, that forces you to have a leader in every chair, and it makes everybody in the group grow into it. So even though they don't think of themselves as a leader, yeah, they've actually been a leader in the group for 5 years, not even knowing that. So you can promote leadership without people really thinking that they're potentially a leader. I guess, I don't know if that's a good way to say it, but just continue to let people do what it is that they want to do. And, they'll lead just naturally, when they become vested in the group and everything, right?
Yeah,
So,
sure.
So
Thanks. I'm going to let Twyla take a turn.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Is that Twyla? So yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, I can actually speak directly on this because I am currently 35, but started running Chicago Cake and Pride almost 10 years ago. And I looking back now, how I was encouraged to be a leader was reinforcing the positive skills that that people were already seeing, and giving me or offering me volunteer opportunities or tasks or jobs that they saw played on my strengths, and then offering the feedback privately about, hey, you did this thing really great, here's where you can improve. But be aware of trying to avoid words for some people like, oh, you make a great leader, oh my God, you're doing, everyone's looking up to you, because for it may be intimidating, it may be overwhelming, or like for me, I live with self-loathing, so I'll be like, no, it's not, and kind of completely dismiss it, versus, you did this task really well. That's great. Can we have you do this now because we saw you working on this? Because it is a task-oriented positive reinforcement, as well as reinforcing positive language. And then when they do something that needs improvement, wording it in a way that builds them up. But again, also avoiding words that might overwhelm them, like leadership, being looked up to a leader, anything like that.
Yeah, that's a great statement. And you run into that a lot. So I guess that's one of the subtleties of it. Someone can exhibit great qualities, but never think of themselves as a leader. They can be involved 20 years and be one of the best leaders of the group and not even think that that's what they're doing. So in a lot of ways, it's as much, I guess, attitude or approach. When you're getting in spirit and you're using that to serve your community, that's all it really is.
And those are good aspects of humility, right? You want that in your leaders. Is you don't want them to avoid it. You don't want them to be overwhelmed by it, but just say, I'm here doing the right thing and happy to do it.
Yeah, and that's all it really takes. Just encouraging your people to participate. Anybody who participates is really a leader. You have other people that just kind of show up and attend, right? But then you have those who participate, and those are the people that are moving into that realm. They understand that everybody has to give a little to make it all work. So yeah, so it's all good stuff. Yeah, I like it. That's why I like leadership. I'm kind of geeky in that respect. So, but it's really good stuff. Okay, so then looks like we're a little ahead of schedule. So we'll go ahead and do this last section and talk about it, and then I've got a couple other things to go with after that, and then we'll be done. All right, let me get set back up here. This new PowerPoint is so weird. It makes you flip the screens and do all this other weird stuff just to get it to work. Okay, so now okay, back to questions. All right, so there you go. So that's servant leadership. So as you can see how things are going here, we are connecting to divinity, becoming more in spirit as a person. And now we talked about how to take that, whatever it is that you have to offer, you're in spirit, and taking that out to the people in an effective way that they're going to want to work with you, right? So now we're going to start talking about how to do community building. And with this, I'm going to use an acronym that they used a couple of years ago at the Tallest Leadership Summit, GROW, or GROW. And turned out to be a great acronym for community building, right? So we're going to talk about how to grow your community. So this part's just a little different, but it's really good stuff. So GROW. So what does GROW stand for? Well, it stands for grit, relationships, ownership, and wonder. So these things are just some of the manifestations that happen when you're actually working in community, and the things it actually really takes to get your community firing on all cylinders, I guess you could say. So the first thing here is having grit. And really it's motivation, strength, endurance, patience, perseverance, leadership, firmness of character. You're getting out there and you got the grit, getting it done. But what does this, translate to for us? Really, it's having what it takes to get the job done, right? So many of us put on ritual, put on dinners, everybody's got, oh, I forgot to get tape, I got to run home, get it, whatever it takes to get the job done is really grit. And a lot of us have experienced that, all the stuff that we have to do just to make something, pull something off and make it quality, right? So, really having what it takes to get the job done. But, what does that really mean for your community as far as you being part of that? And that is really consistent effort over time. Now that I've been in this community for well over 20 years, it's like, oh yeah, okay, we are because of consistent effort over time. It's hard to build a community in a couple months or a year, but given enough time, you can really do a good job. So the grit of growing your community is basically sticking with it, right? Consistent effort over time. You just got to do it. You just got to grind it out, and do the things you do them well. People will show up, treat them nice, and you'll have yourself a community, right? But you got to have the grit to do that. Just takes a while. Okay, so then the next thing, relationships. And we generally think of relationships, talking with people, working with people, a connection between people. But, you know, the reality of it all is it's actually the most important part of the process. It's really what brings a community together and allows it to be sustained over time, right? Relationships, man, are the most important part of the process. And that's what's really important. You know, I was talking about being nice all the time. You know, you don't want to just be mean and cause problems. You know, if you can develop great relationships, you will go far with your community. So, but what's that really mean for community? Well, it means a community based on love, which will be long lasting and productive. So here's a little story for you about relationships and community and love. So I have a little bit of and this is kind of a controversial subject, but I'm just going to talk about it anyway, because it's the truth that works for me. So I'm going to say a secret weapon. I don't know, my thing that I do that really helps to build community is I like to hug. So, because, you know, we're all energetic beings. And of course, that energy, you know, exists outside of ourselves and our auras or whatever. And when you can actually, you know, hug a person, it's a chance for two people's auras to intermingle. And when that happens, that kind of creates an affinity between those two. You know, I'm not on the Facebook. I tell people, well, to be my friend, to friend me, you got to hug me, right? And it's because of that, you know. So through that act of hugging others, you can really kind of align yourselves together, right? And create really loving relationships that are super long lasting and productive. I mean, when Elaine and I were in seminary back in the late 90s, and before that, we were meeting people and, you know, we were hugging and we were falling in love. And 20 some years later, we're still ritualing, you know, circling with the same people because we all just fell in love with each other. And, you know, it's like, wow. The reality of that is that, you know, most people in this world are love starved. I mean, really love starved. And when they're exposed to really pure spiritual love, they're just like, wow, you know, they just can't get enough, I guess, you know. And so when you have something else to offer other than what it is you do on paper, it makes a big difference. For example, a lot of people, they go to something and they acquire all the knowledge and they're like, okay, they're done. They go to the next thing and they acquire all the knowledge and then they're done. And then, okay, they go to the next thing and they acquire whatever and then they're done, right? There's nothing there that ever holds them in place. But if you can offer something beyond just doing Wiccan ritual or whatever the case may be, like love, that becomes very attractive to people. They maybe don't understand that that's what's going on, but really that is what's going on. Is that as a spiritual person, you're right, you're in spirit, you're in divinity, you're in love. And then when you hug those people, they feel that love. And it's I want to say, you know, attractive, but it's like it's a craving thing. We all want to be loved. We all want to be in love with everybody and everything. But the reality is it just doesn't happen for most people. So building loving relationships will last a long, long time and be very productive. I mean, even last night we had once a month on Ivy Lane, we do this thing called Fourth Friday, and we have everybody over for just a social evening. And we had, you know, however many people came over last night, and we just hung out and did our thing. And we just, you know, we're just all in love with each other, and it's just a great space to be in for community. So our community is, you know, destined to be here for a very long time, just because we all like each other, we all get along well, and you know, it shows. A very thriving community based on relationships, right? Relationships are the most important thing, and if you can base them on love, people are going to come into your group and they're going to stay and really want to be a part of that group long term. So a little tip. So remember that relationships based on love will be very productive. All right, the next thing, ownership, right? Possessing some item or intellectual property, a legal right of possession, that kind of thing, right? And we talked a little bit about ownership before, but what's it really mean? Well, showing up all the time, right? You know, in the last 20 some years, you know, I've maybe missed a small handful of events because I either, you know, I was working out of town or I was sick or something, but pretty much the entire time I've done this, yeah, I've showed up to everything. I and my wife, I mean, we just go to it all. So now here's a little story about ownership and showing up all the time. So finally, we started seminary in 1999, and we were already kind of getting into the community. Well, about 10 years later, you know, I got ordained in 2008 and 2009, 2010. We're doing our thing with the community. And it dawned on us that in that time of just showing up all the time, we had actually become the rotating epicenter of the community, because we were working with everybody and all those other people weren't necessarily working with each other, right? So somehow or other, just the fact that we were showing up, we became, without trying ourselves, you know, we just became the center of the community. And I thought that was such a fascinating phenomenon, just simply because we just showed up. And that's all it took, was just showing up, and bam, here we are. Now we're kind of at the center of everything going on. And yeah, you know, ownership pays off, but that's what it means. You show up to everything. That's just how it goes if you want to promote your community and be a part of it. But also everything that goes on, we like being at anyway, right? So we just show up just because it's all cool pagan-y stuff that we're into. So it can be easy, but it really kind of means, you know, showing up all the time. You know, another thing can be, well, what all needs to go on, you know? So I show up, but then, you know, you're putting away chairs and tables at the end, right? Or you're getting out chairs and tables before the potluck or whatever, you know, basically just supporting your members in any way you can. And that's ownership, you know, just showing up with heartfelt love and being there. It's not hard. And it's effective. Let me tell you, it works well. And then lastly, what does it mean for a community? Okay, so here we go. I missed a couple slides, sorry. So yeah, so showing up to all the events with heartfelt love, helping with any task that's needed, and supporting the members of your community. That's really what it looks like as a leader, and what you have to do to keep your community built and strong. And then the last one here, wonder, amazement, fascination, happiness, joy, a cause of surprise, astonishment, or admiration, right? Good stuff. But, you know, what does it really mean? Or what is it really? Well, actually, it's kind of fuel for community service. I mean, for me, I'm just amazed at how the local community, the Wacompagans, has turned out, man. It's just such a great group of people. I'm blown away. It's just a wonder for me. And knowing that it can happen is great fuel for continuing my public service. I mean, I've been doing it for, you know, over a little over 20 years now or whatever. And I'm going to do it for another 20 years. You know, I'm just so blown away by how well it all works that, you know, it's fuel. It just keeps me going. I just love being around people and how it all just pans out, and it's such a wonderful thing that, yeah, it's just like, wow, this keeps me motivated. It's like, yeah, I want more. I want to do more, you know, I want to be with my people more. It's fun stuff. But what does it really mean for your community? Well, it actually means community growth and long-term sustainability. I mean, communities take a while to build, and then you maintain them for what? Forever? You know, that's a long time. Forever is a long time, right? So by seeing the wonder in it all, you know, and for me, you know, all the details of the neo-pagan stuff is just like, yeah, what it is. But I find it all in the people that I work with. A lot of people consider, oh, the magic is the spell you cast or the talisman you make or the, witch bottle that you do or whatever. But for me, man, the magic has always been in the people I've worked with. To me, that's the true magic, is everyone else who's gathered with me doing stuff. And it's just that wonder that comes with that just really propels your community to continue to grow, because you're always having more people come in than leave, because they're seeing these things, the wonder of it all, the love of it all, and they want to be a part of that, right? And ultimately it leads to long-term sustainability. Here we are, just we're out on the edge of the known universe, but people up here, the Whatcom Pagans, we just love getting together and doing stuff, and it has really enabled long-term stability and sustainability. I mean, like I said, the same group of people, we've been together over 20 years doing stuff because we just like hanging out with each other and being in love and realizing the wonder of it all, that we have what we have and how precious it is. It's like, wow, pretty wild. So yeah, so we're very happy with how this goes, and wonder is a big part of it, right? Got to have wonder to keep it going. Okay, so quick little recap. So grit, getting the job done. Relationships need to be based on love. Ownership, showing up. Wonder, fuel for your service, right? So remember these four when you're building your community and working on that, because this is really kind of how it's going to play out for you, right? So it's not really a handbook for you, but you just have to jump in, because if you're in spirit and you're trying to bring it to the people with servant leadership, then once you get into growing your community, then it just kind of takes off. And this is kind of how you have to interface with that, to make sure it continues and grows and does its thing, right? So bringing it all together. So you can see that we have connecting to divinity, we're becoming in spirit, we have servant leadership, we're taking whatever it is that we're developing in ourselves to our people, and then we're community building, we're growing that community so you can have more people to do whatever it is that you do with, right? Because it's always funner in a group. Not to disparage solitaries, but we're gregarious, where we tend to collect in groups, man, to do our neo-pagan thing. So that's just kind of what we are like, building community. So okay, so community building. Any questions before I finish up?
Well, this has been great. Really appreciate it. And community building is key. I mean, we are such a small part of the overall population, around 2%, that the more community we create, the more we can be together and help each other and support each other. And I wonder if there are any thoughts about, because I hear from a lot of solitaries who say, there are times when I want community and there are times when I don't. And having a place for people to go and what you're providing is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, for us, kind of how we're structured is, Whatcom Pagans is just kind of the community, but we also have a number of small groups, a couple covens, a women's circle, various little things going on, little teaching groups. And then we just all happen to come together in this community space, and everybody so graciously volunteers to do a Sabbath, each year or whatnot. And that just allows us to be able to provide that fundamental spiritual service to the community. Whoever can just show up and catch a good ritual, and we usually have a potluck and whatnot. Well, currently not because of COVID and all that, but yeah, it's just we try to design everything. We have greeters that we implemented a few years ago, just trying to make people feel at home when they show up. It's like, I've been looking for my home all this time, kind of thing. So yeah, it's really nice that to be able to provide that environment for people. People are just so important to this whole thing, and to be able to do that, is really, really a great thing. So any other questions currently? Yes, no? Okay, well, then let me, am I showing up on your screen, or is it still the,
We're seeing your web browser for Zoom, but we can see you as well.
okay. So when I escaped out of this, it didn't escape me out of the whole thing. Okay, well, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to witness me going back into this.
No worries.
Because yeah, this new version of PowerPoint is so weird, man. I gotta swap screens and then resize stuff. It's kind of funny because vocationally, I'm a network engineer. So I do everything from the wall to the internet, but I actually have a kind of a hard time with with computers. Okay, so you can see the questions again.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So then to recap, see, I'm in the right spot. Okay, so yeah, so the overall arc then, right? Bringing it all together, connecting to divinity, taking it to your people, and then creating a community to carry that forward, right? Got some resources for you to check out. So the first one is the Pagan Leadership Anthology. This is a great book. It's got 40 some stories in it from different authors. I recommend this to everybody. It's better read this book and read about all the mistakes they made, so you don't have to make them, right? So you get a great perspective on a lot of stuff, how to do it, how not to do it. Very important, right? Avoid the mistakes. Someone else can make them and you can learn from it. You don't have to make them yourself. Great book. The Circle Way, A Leader in Every Chair. Very big proponent of the flat circle structure business model. The hierarchical one, yeah, it's okay. I mean, like Covens will still do that or whatnot, but it's just too much to be in charge. When you got a flat circle, got a leader in every chair, it all works itself out, and it all works itself out very well. So I always recommend, that's a great business model if you can pull it off, to be able to do that, the Circle Way. Then the last one, The Different Drum, Community and Making Peace. This is an older book. It's dated, so the last 3 chapters or whatever, aren't relevant, but the first several 5 or 7 chapters are great. It's about this guy's journey to discovering community, and it's really insightful to read this and see what he actually realized community was in all of his journey. So yes, all really good stuff. Okay, so then I have one last thing for you. This is your homework. So a final reflection question for you. So what does your leadership look like going forward post-pandemic, right? What are you doing? Are you trying to get back into your community? Are you trying to start another community? Are you just trying to look around and figure out what's going on? Assuming that, everyone here wants to be a leader or already is or whatnot, thinking ahead, know what you know now, what's your leadership going to look like moving forward. So something for you to think about. And that's all I have, unless anybody has any last questions.
This was wonderful, Lee. Thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom, your time with us.
Well, you're welcome. Yeah, this is a subject that doesn't necessarily get touched upon a lot, but it's actually very important to make, it's like under the hood kind of thing, right? It's like, everybody's got their own theology, their own shtick that they're trying to do, but we don't really talk about, but what's it take to, make things all work and stay together, when you got groups of people working. So yeah, it's good stuff. So thank you, Lawrence, for allowing me to come and talk about it.
Thank you. Well, we hope to see everybody again in person next year, and thank you and blessed be.
All right.